Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from lunch. This year's forum, is aimed at giving you much more variety and hands-on experience as much as possible. So remember, there are three options for you this afternoon. There's the workshop that's taking place in the XIII Hall. That's about to start on media coverage of major sports events such as the Olympics and the World Cup. Experienced broadcaster and advisory consultant to the International Olympic Committee, Paul Radford, is giving practical advice, and that's going to be a great workshop. We have the former Afghan President Hamid Karzai, who was on the panels earlier, giving a lecture on new challenges and opportunities in his country, and that's being held at Nazarbayev University. That transport was arranged, so I suspect everyone has already made their way to the university for that. And this, our third session, starts here in this room, examining the future for oil-producing countries in a world where change is coming fast, it seems. Also, an early reminder, at 5 p.m. at the Nazarbayev University, the governor of Astana International Financial Center, Khairat Kelimbetov, will be giving a lecture on state-owned financial assets during a period of global financial instability. Again, if you want to attend any of those lectures at the university, please go upstairs to the registration desk and get your registration put in there so that they can arrange transport to the university for you. That's at 5 p.m. There's also a masterclass on the evolving face of news given by Pankaj Paul, who's the editor of Knowledge at Wharton. That's also at 5 p.m. and that'll be in the XIII Hall as well. Now, for those of you staying here, let's get on with our third session. It's called New Image of the Oil Countries: How to Enhance the Effectiveness on Branding in a Challenging World, or Changing World, where we'll examine how brand development strategy is becoming a bigger factor for oil-producing companies and countries who have to look at a new landscape for where the future is about confidence and image playing a big part. So please give a very warm welcome to our moderator and anchor of global business at CCTV in China, Cheng Lei.
Thank you, Riz. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. And as Riz said, my name is Cheng Lei, and very proud to be one of the few Chinese voices at this Eurasian Media Forum. And I'm very lucky in one way, because this session, after oil, after the Middle East, is a lot softer and probably more fun and maybe less political than the other sessions. But then I'm unlucky in a way, because this is the post-lunch session. So we'll try to make it as exciting as possible. Oil prices have crashed from over $100 to $40 a barrel. Oil-producing countries are hurting. A lot of them feel the urgency to diversify their economies, and with that, to improve the image in order to attract more investment, to woo more tourists. How do they do that? Do they need to even do that? What can go wrong? Well, to help me answer those questions, I'm going to welcome our very special, very charismatic guest panel, starting with the Vice Foreign Affairs Minister of Kazakhstan, and today the poster boy for Kazakh culture is Roman Vasilenko. Big welcome. And then we have the Greek Tourism Minister from 2012 to 2015, Olga Kefalogianni. She's also a lawyer and a Member of Parliament. We then have the man who supposedly started or coined the phrase nation brand. He's at pains to point out that it's nation brands, not nation branding, and we'll let him explain that in a little while. Mr. Simon Anholt. He's helped many countries with their brands. We also have Mr. Yerbo Shomanov, who is the Deputy Chairman of Expo 2017, Kazakhstan. He used to be the Deputy Mayor of Almaty. And finally, we have Mr. Maxim Suchkov, our international affairs expert from Russia, to give us some perspectives from a public diplomacy point of view. Okay, so let's talk about the topic of nation branding. I want to ask Simon You are supposedly the leading expert on nation brands, and yet you say countries don't really need to do branding as such. Why is that?
Because it doesn't work.
Why not?
I've spent the last 20 years researching this field, measuring the images of nations, and working with more than 50 countries as they've attempted in one way or another to manipulate their images. And I have never found one that has actually succeeded. The simple fact of the matter is that countries are judged by what they do, not by what they say. There's another very good term for nation branding, which is propaganda. And it's the same idea. You try to manipulate people's perceptions using messages. Propaganda only works within a single closed society. If you control all the messages that your audience reaches, as happens today in North Korea, then you can manipulate their perceptions. Outside in the world, where there's a free flow of information, it's impossible. So my message to every government who's asked me about this over the last 20 years has been, spend your taxpayers' money on something useful. You can promote tourism, and Olga is going to talk to us about that, using marketing. Of course that works, because you're selling a product. You can promote for foreign investment. That works. If you're holding a big event like an expo, sure, use marketing to sell that event. But the idea that you can use marketing or messages or logos or public relations to change people's minds about your country, it just doesn't happen.
Okay, you've mentioned Olga. I'll put the next question to Olga. You were tourism minister for Greece from 2012 to 2015, and as we people in Biz News know, those were pretty tough years, given the debt crisis, given the social unrest that happened, and you had no budget to work with. So tell us specifically what you did to turn tourism around.
First of all, since this is my first time in Kazakhstan, in Astana, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. And I would like to congratulate them for a really impressive organization here at the Eurasia Media Forum. It's really nice to be here, and it's really nice to be able to exchange views on how different countries facing different challenges, having different opportunities, still we are all together in this world facing common problems, common issues. So I think that it's mostly important, even though we are in different parts of the world, to be able to exchange our views. So as you said, I was the tourism minister of Greece from 2012 until 2015, beginning of 2015, when the government changed. Greece has been a tourist destination for more than a century. So it was a country very well known for its tourism offering. As Simon said before, the image of a country transcends crisis. It doesn't have to do with what is going on today. It has to do with what people perceive you as being throughout your history. So in the beginning, when I assumed office in 2012, we were very much worried that the images of Athens with its demonstrations, the media, the international media portraying Greece as a country in dire times, in going through an economic crisis, going through a recession, that would in effect have would create a problem for our country's image. We consulted Simon Anholt, and I have to say this because the most important thing that Simon managed to do with us was to actually calm us down. Because Simon said, don't worry, the image of your country will not be affected by the economic crisis. Greece has been around for thousands of years. People have associated it with the birth of democracy, as the cradle of Western civilization, with arts, with all the sciences. Greece has been around as a tourist destination for so long. People will continue coming to Greece. So you should not worry so much about what the crisis is doing for the image of your country as a whole. So this was very good in effect because it made us realize that the only thing we should focus on was marketing in terms of tourism. So tourism could in effect be affected by negative images, by a dire situation in your country. But this is not the case for the image of a country as a whole. So I think that what we managed to do with tourism and consulting Simon was focusing on the brand Greece as a tourist destination. And what we thought would be more influencing to the broader public as a whole would be to remind the classical values of Greece. Why Greece was, in effect, one of the top tourist destinations in the world for so many consecutive years. And this is why our campaign went back actually to the core values, the main experiences that have drawn international tourists to Greece throughout the years. So this is what we said. Greece is all-time classic. So it's an all-time classic destination, and focusing a lot on the internet and the social media, which is, of course, the most effective and I would say also a cost-effective way to reach the broader public. We managed to revamp the image of Greece as a tourist destination, and 2013 and 2014 were record years, both in terms of tourist arrivals, but also in terms of revenue. What I would like to send as a message to anyone trying to revamp or create from the beginning the image of their country as a tourist destination is that you need to have a strategy, a very clear strategy. You need to have a very, very clear message, and you have to be consistent. One of the main problems that we have seen with Greece has faced this in the past, and so I'm not saying that we are an exception to that. A lot of countries would have a tourism marketing campaign, and then with the change of government or the change of a minister, you would change the campaign, you would change the message. So this is not doing you any good because you really need to be consistent. And the last thing that I would like to point out is that tourism marketing does not only have to do with destinations. So we are bombarded every day with so many information and pictures and images of different destinations around the world. The main thing about tourism is experiences. You need to be able to describe and make potential visitors realize that they will have a unique experience in your country at the destinations. So this is not just showing a picture of a beautiful beach. We have 15,000 kilometers of coastline in Greece, some 2,000 islands, very beautiful islands. But what we wanted to project is not the image just of a tourist destination for sea and sun, but a destination where you can have a unique and authentic experience.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
calm, consistent, clear strategy, all winners in the tourism game. Roman, you were in the US when Borat came out and there was a lot of media attention. How do you feel about cultural stereotypes? Is it better to be culturally misunderstood than culturally invisible?
Thank you. Well, қайырлы күн, құрметті достар, құрметті қонақтар, шетелдік қонақтар, Қазақстанға қош келдіңіз дейміз. I just welcomed all the foreign guests to Kazakhstan. I think it is not good either way, but you mentioned Borat. We hopefully tried to benefit from that situation 10 years ago and used the misconception that this famous British actor was promoting to really promote the real Kazakhstan. So in a sense, trying to make lemonade out of the lemons that he gave us. But I think that I was listening very attentively to our Greek colleague, and I was just in Poland talking to the Polish colleagues as well. And obviously we are in three different situations. Greece is a country with, as was just said, at least 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years of recorded history. Poland is a country which is also well known, but it faces still some misconceptions and misperceptions, even within the European Union, some prejudices towards the Polish people among some other European peoples. And here you have Kazakhstan, a country which appeared on the map as is 25 years ago or even less. And we face very different challenges, but they are similar in a way, and the approaches should be relatively similar as well, and should be different, because we have to basically run as a young country twice as fast as Greece, or Greece can indeed keep calm and just walk along, hoping with very good grounds that all these temporary problems will disappear. Poland has to face a lot of misperceptions because of the entangled European history and history of interaction of the European peoples for millennia. Kazakhstan, in this case, has to present itself as a new independent country. That's why we pay so much attention to the way we are perceived abroad.
Thank you, Roman. And Yerbal, you're in charge of managing Expo 2017, and as someone who's covered Expo Shanghai in 2010, I realize how huge and how complicated a task that is. So how do you make sure you get the most bang out of your buck for an event such as Expo?
Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'd like to say that the global agenda today is very broad, and in that sense, the energy security, the food crisis, as well as other issues, and the topic of the Expo, the energy of the future energy, is unique in a way, and we'll make whatever we can to cover this subject as much as possible. We're actively preparing for the Expo. We don't have a single reason to worry in terms of conducting the Expo. We are confident that we'll conduct it at a very high level. Currently, 81 countries has officially confirmed its participation in the Expo, 14 large international organizations as well. We're working with all those countries very closely in matters related to preparation for the exhibition, for the Expo. And I hope that we are a country blessed with abundant natural resources. Nevertheless, we're taking an active part in today's agenda. We're diversifying our economy. We're moving towards the green economy, and the Expo is one of the telling examples where we can show to the world that the energy of the future, renewables, is something that the whole world is striving towards. Thank you.
Simon, your advice for Expo 2017.
I think the Expo has a really interesting potential for having a big global discussion about something that's not sport. At the moment, the only real global events are sporting events, the Olympics, the World Cup, and so forth. There isn't really a venue for the world to get together and discuss things other than sport. I don't think that the Expo has ever really achieved that yet, but I think that Kazakhstan could be the first one that actually does that and proves the full potential of the Expo. So my advice, if I can presume to offer advice to Kazakhstan, the biggest danger for them in this Expo is to be insufficiently ambitious. They should not consider this just as an opportunity to raise the profile of Kazakhstan, because frankly, the Expo can't do that. All of my research on the images of countries over the years has shown that most big events, even huge events like the Summer Olympics, they either make no difference to a country's image or else occasionally they can seriously damage it. So that's not the reason to do the Expo. The reason to do the Expo is in order to engage the world in a productive conversation about something that really matters to everybody and to take the lead in that conversation. If Kazakhstan's strategy is to help encourage the world towards sustainable energy, then that's a fantastic winning strategy. Of course, they have to succeed. Of course, they have to really do it. But the Expo is a wonderful opportunity for them to start that conversation.
So think big. Maximum, we were chatting about this at lunch, talking about sports as a way to lift a country's profile. And you mentioned the Russian Sochi Winter Games, which didn't work. Tell us about that.
Well, obviously, as I said, of all the panelists present here, I felt like I was the least qualified to speak on the issues simply because I did not personally had a practical experience, unlike many of the other panelists. And in fact, when Simon started his remarks, I realized that it is something that I wanted to start my remarks with, that to be it doesn't really matter what image branding tool you use until you are a success in itself. If you are a success, then it's much easier, obviously, to promote whatever image you're trying to build. Well, yeah, that doesn't necessarily make you that strategy successful, right? But it makes it a lot easier. As far as sports events are concerned, I do believe that there is a certain trend, and especially what I observed is the BRICS countries trying to explore sports as a tool, may not be a unique tool, but still a tool that helps them drive its international image to new heights. If you look at China in Summer Olympics in 2008, then you had World Cup in South Africa in 2010, Brazil World Cup in 2014 in the upcoming Olympics, Russia Sochi Olympics, and the upcoming World Cup. So you see all of these nations are exploring two major sports events as ability to drive them to drive their image. At the same time, there is something more behind it, as I see it, and it has to do with their ability to manage huge events, to manage lots of people, and that in itself, as I see it, is supposed to demonstrate their ability to be like big international players as they claim to be.
On the Beijing Olympics, I have a personal story to share, and that is the organizing committee, BOCOG, had a journalist junket for reporters from around the world. I was part of that. Of course, as I was with CNBC, and we paid our own way, but the other journalists were basically had all their expenses covered. And there were two Swiss reporters who had written their China-bashing pieces on the plane before getting off and basically being given, a very, very welcoming tour of Beijing, of the stadiums, the Great Wall, etc. So I guess sometimes expectations that if you pay for journalists to come, that they will always do good write-ups, they could disappoint. And Simon has a point to raise.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond very briefly to a couple of points that Maxim made. I agree with everything he said. The question of raising the profile of a nation by being a very effective host for a big event, unfortunately that doesn't work, because the world's expectation is always that these big events will be well managed. So if it's well managed, they don't notice it. They simply don't notice it.
There's no bonus points.
There's no bonus points. They will notice it if it's badly managed. If something goes terribly wrong, they will notice it, and they will remember it for possibly 17 minutes before the next thing comes along. So imagining that you can improve the image of your country by being a wonderful, successful host of a big event, I'm afraid it's not true.
Maxim?
Forgive me, I just wanted to make one other point, if I may. Maxim also mentioned the South African World Cup and the Brazil World Cup. As a matter of fact, research shows that although the Beijing Olympics did improve the image of China, and it's continued to improve ever since, it seriously damaged the image of South Africa, the World Cup, and it seriously damaged the image of Brazil, the World Cup. Why was this? Well, because when people around the world are watching those events on TV, they're not just watching football, and they're not just watching athletics. They're also seeing hours and hours of documentary footage about the host country and the host nation. And if you're a country that has a lot of poverty and a lot of inequality, like South Africa, like Brazil, which people are not aware of because they think that you're much more developed. They will see all of that on the TV and they will be surprised and they will downgrade your country. So Brazil is running a particular risk at the moment. Its image declined significantly after the World Cup, and now they've got the Olympics, so it will decline even more no matter how successful the event is.
Maximum.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to quickly add something that, some of political commentators called it the yellow water effect. And what I mean is that before the Sochi Olympics started, there were a lot of critical reports on how awful the situation in Sochi is, and there is yellow water running, from taps, and nothing can work. But by and large, it turned out that a lot of that criticism was very much politicized. Some things truly was not as good as they were portrayed. To be fair, but by and large, the Olympics were a success, but they did not, in my view, reach the heights that the Moscow was aiming at simply because of some other factors, and mainly in that case, with the situation in Ukraine that pretty much annulled all of the, branding image building effect that the Russians created through the Olympics, which I think is also an interesting trend, because when the nations that are aiming at sports events as a tool to promote their image, there is a lot of opposition in the media to that. So when you were talking about the reports coming up, absolutely, but there are other reports that are portraying that things are wrong terribly, even when they're not. So that brings me to, and maybe some can reflect on that, if sports is such a powerful image branding tool that, if we're talking about competition on the world stage for the image, that those who are opposing the countries that are hosting them are, trying to battle against that, as a tool.
Olga, you wanted to talk about perhaps Athens?
Well, as you understand, it's important for Greece to be able to be very vocal about the Olympic Games, since the Olympic Games were born in Greece in the ancient times. But I would like to make a point when it comes to countries hosting such big events. Sometimes you spend an excessive amount of money. This is what happened with the Summer Olympic Games of 2004, which were held in Athens, Greece. They were very, very successful games, but they were very, very expensive. Actually, one of the reasons of our deficits is attributed, or could be attributed, to the excessive budget of the Olympic Games of 2004. Do you think that it really boosted tourism in Athens? Not really. Just after the Olympic Games, we started having the issues with the demonstrations and the riots in the city of Athens, and these images actually turned the image of Athens as a tourist destination around. So not only did we not be able to gain something from the Olympic Games, it was actually something that held the economy back. And this is why I would like to focus more on values. I think that it's important for a country to be able to say what it has to offer to the world. And Greece has to offer values. The value of Olympism. Olympism and the Olympic Games, as they were born in the ancient times, were about fair competition. And we should focus more on what values we can project, what values we can share with the international community, rather than trying to compete in terms of hosting events that a country such as Greece could not, in effect, economically sustain. And how many people in this room associate the Olympic Games with Greece, even though the torch relay every year starts in ancient Olympia. In reality, you don't associate the Olympic Games with Greece. So I would say that for Greece, it would have been more efficient if we had spent all this budget trying to promote the idea of Olympism and try to associate in the minds of the people around the globe Olympism and Olympic Games with Greece, an idea and a value that transcends time, rather than trying to host the Olympic Games in a summer period, and people, okay, had a good time, were very successful games, but still this is not something that left a mark in the world.
Ambush marketing.
In this way, I would say that the Expo 2017 is a very good opportunity for Kazakhstan, not only to be more visible to the world, but also to have it as an opportunity to project values that are important for the international community, and in this way show that it's not just a country trying to grow on its own, try to create the wealth only for its own people and its own good, but trying to project this to the rest of the world. And since it is an oil producing country, this message of being energy efficient and trying to use alternative methods of creating energy and trying to have sustainable development, this is even more important. Thank you.
Roman?
Thank you. Well, we are going to have the World Winter University next year, which is about to attract the largest number of participating countries in Almaty. And I think we should be all mindful of the pitfalls that Simon has outlined. But I think already the focus is to conduct these games at a very, in a very efficient way, so that the expenditures are minimized, but the effect is maximized. But Olga just mentioned a key word, values. And it's indeed the values that we would like to see seen as part of the national brand that Kazakhstan has. And that's why we think that our people are the most valuable asset, the most valuable value that we should promote naturally. Because right now we are discussing some mechanics, but it seems like we are revolving around the idea of whether it's better to be or to be seen. And in Kazakhstan's case, we understand fully well that the national perception abroad can only depend and will depend solely on the actual performance of the country economically, socially, on its contribution to the world. And I fully subscribe to Simon's worldview that the country needs to do good, to do well in image building. So you don't have to spend millions or large amounts on image building. You have to spend efforts and you have to help other countries. You have to spend effort to develop your own country. And I'm encouraged by the fact that within Kazakhstan, there is a very big movement, I would say, visible now in social media especially, to really participate in building an image. Whatever anything happens that is even remotely related to the way the outside world will see Kazakhstan. For example, some cases with children of some high-profile people who don't behave well, or a police officer mistreating a foreigner. This creates such a major storm in the social media and the society. People discuss this, people understand that this is not good, and this impacts the way the society absorbs these shocks and then deals with them to build a better society, to project a better value in terms of the national image. So that's the way we're going to approach this.
Simon, you were shaking your head and then nodding. So do you think that's the right approach for oil-producing countries to enhance their image?
As usual, I was agreeing and disagreeing with my friend Roman at the same time. Like Roman, I agree entirely with what Olga was saying about values. Fundamentally, this is very, very simple. There is no reason why people in other countries should admire Kazakhstan for what it does for its own people. right? So anything that talks about how successful Kazakhstan is as a country will not do anything for your image, because by definition, people in other countries have a perfectly good country of their own, and they're not looking for another one. They don't care how successful Kazakhstan is. The only reason why they would care about Kazakhstan is if it does something for them, right? So in 2000...
But you're a proponent of the good party, where countries
Exactly
should be
my point.
standing...
Exactly my point, and I was just about to say that. You correctly anticipated me. In 2014, I released the Good Country Index, which is an index that measures exactly what each country's impact is on the rest of the world, outside its own borders. And one of the things that this is designed to do is to make people think about their contribution to the rest of humanity and to the planet. Because all of the research shows that that's the only thing that can actually make you admired. If you are admirable, if you do things, if you make a difference to other people's lives. So what I would like to add to Olga's point is that talking about projecting your values, well, what do we mean by projecting? The only way you can project your values is by acting them out in the things that you do. So here's a suggestion. If Kazakhstan wants to project the value of believing in sustainable energy, looking after future generations, cherishing the whole planet, not just Kazakhstan's own large slice of territory, then it should follow its own lead. It announced that it was going to become a non-nuclear country. Now it should announce that it's going to become a non-fossil fuel country. And it should guarantee that it's going to leave all the oil in the ground, because that's the only responsible thing that an oil producer can do today, and invest in replacing all of that fossil fuel energy with sustainable alternative energy. Now, that would be an expensive thing to do, okay? That would be a real big gesture, but nobody on earth would miss it, nobody on earth would challenge it, nobody would disbelieve it, everybody would be obliged to say, my God, they really mean it.
Or they're crazy.
No, they really mean it.
Roman?
Yes, thank you, Simon. Well, I didn't mean solely to, go around every single corner in the world and tell people how great we are. I mean actually by projecting the value, by actually doing things. I don't know if we are ready to such a radical step as you suggest to forego oil development for now, but we have a goal of making our country 50% green by 2015. So that's a major challenge in and of itself. We are moving towards that. I don't know how much of an impact it has in the world, maybe not that much. We are already doing what we preach, basically. For example, we are helping neighboring countries. We understand we cannot be living in a safe environment if we just enjoy our lives and then watch silently problems unfold and develop in neighboring countries, and we are helping them through bilateral assistance, through economic projects, and through the establishment of an official development agency, which is going to be focused on Afghanistan. And we heard President Karzai mentioning some of the things Kazakhstan has been doing to help Afghanistan. Of course, they are not on a global scale yet, but we are moving towards that goal, and we are, for example, going to continue to push for the nuclear disarmament globally. We did indeed renounce nuclear weapons. We will push for others to follow the lead, and we will show how our own example of living in such a complex environment without nuclear weapons is possible and can be shared by others. So again, promoting values only by sharing them with others. For example, another thing, we are a diverse society, as is obvious, a country of more than 100 ethnic groups. We pride ourselves on peace and harmony that we have in our country. But again, we don't just sit there and enjoy ourselves. We share this experience with others. We've launched the Congress of Leaders of World Religions. Our president has launched the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, an organization which never existed before and which is now bringing together 26 nations in Asia and Eurasia. So we are trying. It's hard, but we are trying. We understand your point fully well. We need to contribute.
Yerbal, increasingly, marketing is being driven by data, driven by technology, whereas in the past it might have been driven by creatives. So what role will data technology play in the marketing of Expo 2017?
I fully share the opinion of our colleagues who have just voiced the idea about the values that an expo like this could carry with it. I believe that we have a very big and ambitious objective to convey the values through the expo to everyone, and our objective is to convey to all corners of the world what expo is all about and what the essential topic of it is. And I think that a large-scale expo for us is another opportunity to be used as a tool to get there. And therefore, when we talked about technologies today, let me say that when we talk about renewables, we are inspired by such countries as Norway, where they have 87%, Denmark 70%, Costa Rica 50%. Those are the countries that have been successful in terms of implementing such projects, and Kazakhstan is capable of becoming one of such leaders in sustainable energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, I want to talk about negative press. What happens when there's an issue? How do you get over it? How do you respond in the best way so that your image isn't tarnished?
There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to be patient and wise and wait for the storm to pass.
Is this what you told the Malaysian government?
This is what I tell every government. I had a journalist from Belgium on the phone to me this morning. You know that Brussels suffered 2 terrible terrorist attacks quite recently. This journalist told me that her government was about to spend some obscene amount of money, tens of millions of euros of taxpayers' money, on, quote-unquote, correcting the image of Belgium, which was destroyed by the terrorist attacks. And I said, I wonder whether your government has actually checked to find out whether that assumption is true, because I have, and it's not true. The image of Belgium was not damaged by the terrorist attacks. If the images of countries were damaged every time there was a natural disaster or an economic crisis or a terrorist attack, every country on earth would have a damaged image, because every country on earth suffers some kind of accident or mishap from time to time. The fact is that these things don't change the image, and the Belgian government should spend that money on security in order to ensure that those attacks don't happen again, because there's only one way of ensuring that that changes the image, is if it happens regularly and consistently over a very long period. So I think if there's bad press, you just have to ride it out. In the case of Greece, I don't want to spoil Olga's lines here, but one thing you can do and should do in these situations is conventional tourism promotion, because you need to reassure people that it's still okay to come there on holiday. You don't refer to what's happened, because then you're just telling people who didn't know about it what's happened. But simply doing conventional sectoral promotion, it works. Countries have been doing it for centuries. We know that it works. The more money you spend on tourism promotion, the more tourists you will get. So that's very straightforward. I think the idea of meddling with the country's reputation is really a very dangerous distraction for governments. Your image is not something you should worry about. It's something that you should park in a room and shut the door, and don't be neurotic about it. Your image will follow your behavior. If you do the right things for the right reasons, eventually people will recognize that. But it does take a long time. You have to be patient. It takes generations to change the image of a country. And the biggest problem here, the reason why we're even having this discussion, is because politicians are naturally very impatient. They're only in office for a relatively short time. They want to make a difference within a year or 4 years or 5 years. And unfortunately, they cannot make a difference to the overall standing of the country. What they can do is make a difference to the economy of the country by promoting things that benefit from promotion, like tourism.
So the truth is that tourism could, in effect, be damaged by events, negative events happening in your country, and especially by the way that they are portrayed by international media. So, okay, of course, as Simon said, this means that you have to go back to the conventional sectoral promotion of tourism. But a point that I would like to make is that tourism, in any case, is a very competitive sport. Every country in the world right now is trying to boost its tourism offering, it's trying to enrich its tourism offering, and trying to promote its tourism. So, in effect, you are always in competition with other countries. So, tourism promotion should never stop. It's perpetual. You should be continuously promoting tourism and the tourism offering of your country, and sometimes in a way as to why people should choose your country as their tourism destination rather than another country. As I said in my first remark, it's important to be consistent, and it's important to remain there. Because some countries just feel that they have to participate in some international travel fairs and do some promotion in the beginning of the year, and then it's okay, you don't need to continue promoting tourism because you just get the tourists and then you just need to worry about this 1 year ahead. That is not the case. Tourism should be continuously promoted, and I think that it's very important, going back to the question about data, that nowadays you can do this through the internet, through the social media, year-round, and you can have a very effective strategy and a very palpable results in a very cost-effective way. And it's true that politicians, I'm a politician myself, so you definitely need to be able to show results of your efforts within your term of tenure. Unfortunately, in Greece, our term of tenure is not even the constitutionally provided 4-year term, because we have elections every now and then, so it's even more, let's say, frustrating to be able to show results. But it's true that if a government decided to invest long-term in revamping the image of a country, I think that they should do this through education. And I'm saying this because I've seen that Greece is very well known throughout the world because the Greek myths and a lot of Greek history is taught around the world in very many different countries. So the children in China would learn in school that as the cradle of Western civilization is Greece, they themselves are the cradle of Eastern civilization. And in this way, education in schools really helps create an image of a country. So I would say if Kazakhstan wanted to invest long-term in their image, they should try to put in the curricula of schools in other countries interesting things about Kazakhstan. And if they undertake this initiative now, being in the forefront of promoting renewable energy and a clean planet, which is something that future generations should know about, because this is something that we will offer to the future generations in this world. This is something that they could start, let's say, promoting in the education system of schools in other countries. The same applies to cultural exchanges. I believe a lot in cultural exchanges, and this is why I believe that the diplomatic corps, I think that we have few diplomats here in the room, their focus should be in promoting their country, not only in terms of public diplomacy, but also in terms of investment and in terms of cultural exchanges in the countries in which they are posted. Thank you.
Okay, getting the message into schools, and also, what was the second point again? Oh yes, that's right, the importance of cultural exchanges. Before I hand it over to the floor for questions, Simon, did you want to add something else? You seem to want to.
I just wanted to suggest that we could broaden the topic a little bit from this point. I'm going to risk making an enemy of everybody on the panel once again here, but sometimes it seems to me that all of these discussions about how one can promote the interests of one's own country and increase the world's knowledge of one's own country and one's own history and one's own culture is incredibly selfish and incredibly old-fashioned. It reminds me of a movie that was released in the 1980s called Wall Street. It's all about
good.
It's all about greed is good. It's all about me, me, me. Now I understand, of course, that governments feel correctly that their primary responsibility is their own population. You've got to provide prosperity, security, justice, peace for your own population. But I don't think that that's incompatible at all, by any means, with doing something for the wider world. So I think the modern way of running a country is, instead of asking all the time, what's in it for us? How can we achieve advantage in order to produce growth for our population? We have to ask, what can we do for the whole world that will also benefit our population? Because those two things are perfectly compatible. And I think the best gift that any government can give to its own population is to make its country a principled and generous player in the international community. Because by the principle of karma, that will come back to you in the end. Countries that only think of their own selfish progress will in the end be ostracized by other countries. They may get a bit of money, they may not, but in the end they won't participate fully and they won't be thanked by later generations. The more a country engages with the world, the more it asks itself questions like, what is our gift to the world? Why are we here? What can we do for humanity? The better its reputation will become, and the better it will trade, because other countries will like it and want to do business with it, and as a consequence its economy will grow.
That's a top hierarchy in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, though. But anyway.
Can I
Yes.
just add?
Roman?
Fully agree with what Simon says, and I'm pleased to say that, of course, in our president we have somebody who, of course I cannot get into his head, but I believe that by the policies that he has pursued in leading this country for all these years, and in the policies that he pursued internationally, you can guess that there are two questions that the president asks himself every morning, and that's, what can I do to make life of my own citizens better, and what can I do to make world better? Just look at the manifesto that he proposed at the recent Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. There the president called on everybody to make very specific moves to build a safer world, a world that it doesn't depend on nuclear weapons. And he outlined the steps towards achieving this goal. So this is something that the president has campaigned on for decades, and he'll continue to campaign. This is something he wants to contribute to the world. This is something Kazakhstan wants to contribute to the world as a country which suffers from nuclear testing. So it's a very strong issue for us, and we have been pushing for nuclear disarmament globally. So again, we're not talking about image for the sake of image. And of course, Kazakhstan just wants to be a responsible global citizen. I guess this is a general understanding about the leadership of this country, and I think Simon's preaching over the past few years have had their very good effect. Well, we were sort of gestating towards that idea anyway, but he helped crystallize this approach.
Thank you. Now, over to the audience for questions. Please raise your hand, explain where you're from, and the lady in the fourth row.
Kazakhstan, I'm head of the Kazakhstan Press Club. Simon, the question to you, yes. I fully agree with your points. Could you please name 2 or 3 countries, as the best example of what you mentioned, how they manage their brand in terms of their values? And I really appreciate 2 or 3 concrete examples. And also the question, the second question, you work a lot with the governments and with the government officials. What is the 2 or 3 key, misunderstanding or key issues that you face in negotiation with each of the government? Is it common for all of the governments, or it's really not or issue about one country? Okay, thank you.
Well, examples of countries that have successfully, deliberately branded themselves, I hate that term as you know, by responsible behavior in the international community, I can't name one, not one. but countries who have earned a good reputation by doing the right thing because it's the right thing, and have accidentally earned themselves a good reputation, I could name you 10 or 15 without any difficulty. I mean, for example, one of the countries that always scores very well indeed in the Nation Brands Index, which is my international poll of country images, is Norway. Its image is massively in excess of its real geopolitical importance. Why is that? Well, because people know that it's a country that thinks about other countries. They know that it's a country that has contributed to international peace. I suppose you could call the Oslo Peace Accord a little bit of branding, because it's linked to Oslo, and some people know that Oslo is the capital city of Norway. But I don't think any of this was deliberate. And if you speak to Norwegian governments, past governments about this, there's no evidence of any strategy there. They just felt that they were doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do. And European countries, because of their long experience of cooperation and collaboration within the European community, it comes quite naturally to them to do this kind of thing. The typical misunderstandings, mistakes and errors, well, I suppose there are two. The first one is this belief, this assumption amongst politicians that looking after your own population is incompatible with doing some good in the world. One of the messages that I try to get across most strongly these days is that there is a new style of governance which is beginning to emerge, which recognizes that actually bringing the international dimension into the most local of your domestic governance makes better policy. So the more international, the more cosmopolitan, the more cooperative and collaborative countries are in the way they do domestic politics, the better they will serve their own people. These two things are not incompatible at all. One of the things I've been suggesting recently is that countries should trash their foreign policy and have a global policy. They should completely reframe the role of the foreign minister. Apologies. So that the foreign minister traditionally in some countries, I'm not speaking of Kazakhstan here, which in so many ways really is a model of the new way of doing these things. But the traditional role of the foreign minister is the guy, and it's nearly always a guy, who keeps the foreigners out, right? And so when there's a war, the foreign minister suddenly becomes terribly important and then vanishes as soon as the war is over. I think the foreign minister in the 21st century should be involved in every single aspect of domestic policy, because he or she is the person who opens the windows of the world to more cooperation and more collaboration with every other country and city on every piece of domestic policy. So the biggest misunderstanding of governments is that there's a difference between domestic and international. There isn't. It's the same thing.
Gentleman in the front row.
Sorry, if you touched the foreign minister, so I am from foreign ministry. I'm colleague of Roman and I'm ambassador at large. My name is Altay Biglay. So, I would like to refresh that the main topic of this session is new image of oil-producing countries. You give me example of the Belgium. You give me example of the Greece. Unfortunately, they are not an oil-producing country. And we are talking about how we can generate new brand and new image for oil-producing country. We're not talking about how we can strengthen already generated brand. That's huge differences. In my point of view, I think best example for Kazakhstan is United Arab Emirates. It's an oil-producing country, but huge difference between United Arab Emirates and Kazakhstan is that Kazakhstan is not just 9th largest country. Kazakhstan is also biggest, #1 landlocked country. That's the point. So image, brand of national brand of any country depends on the economic if you have access to the open sea and open market. I think we need your advices and suggestions. Maybe Simon, you can say a few words. What's practical measures for us, how we can establish the new Kazakh brand as Malaysia Truly Asia, as a Turkish brand or other, because it's economical aspect. It's access to the international airlines. It's free visa regime. It's cheapest hotels, it's the cheapest infrastructure and etc. So I think practical measures, practical advices could be much useful for us. Thank you.
Over to you.
I really don't want to speak on behalf of the rest of the panel. I'll just give a very quick answer and then hand over. I think it would be really interesting to answer the question of the panel, what can the oil-producing countries do? Take a look at the cigarette manufacturers. What the oil-producing countries are facing at the moment is precisely the same situation as cigarette manufacturers. It's suddenly discovered that this thing, which has made a huge amount of money for you in the past, is actually harming the human race, right? So it's a real moral dilemma. What do? Do you carry on making money and making excuses for the fact that the people are harming themselves voluntarily? Or do you realize instead that you are in a unique position as a producer of this bad thing to help the human race wean itself off that bad thing?
But
right?
cigarette prices haven't come down.
No, indeed they haven't, and that's because some cigarette manufacturers have responded to this in an exciting, imaginative, moral way. The vast majority haven't. The vast majority have tried to figure out how they can carry on selling an increasingly unpopular product. So I think that there's room for oil-producing countries to take the lead in sustainable energy. This appears to be Kazakhstan's strategy, and I think it's absolutely the correct one.
Okay. Olga?
Yes, the only thing I would like to say is that the image of a country, in my opinion, does not only have to do with the economy. The image of a country has mainly to do with its people, its cultural identity, its cultural heritage, and its values. And this is why I go back to the point of saying that I think that it's most important for a country to project values to the world. And the reason why I believe a lot in education and cultural exchanges is that it's a way to create more tolerant societies. And if we want more peace in the world, it's very important to build more tolerant societies. Thank you.
Okay.
If I can just add, we already mentioned Norway today. Norway is an oil-producing country, although few people now realize that, but this is one of the world's largest oil-producing countries. And Simon was just describing what a great image Norway has, so there is something to learn from in the Norwegian example.
More questions from the floor? Okay, gentleman down the back.
Меня зовут Канат Сахарян.
My name is Kanat Sakhranov from the commercial TV channel. First of all, I would like to thank and to compliment the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Roman Vasilenko, because I would say that Roman Vasilenko has been demonstrating the image and branding by wearing the traditional Kazakh gown. So my thanks go to him and my compliments go to him. I believe that you know what the tools of country imaging and branding are. I would fully agree with the speakers that it makes no sense trying to be who you are not, in fact, are. Everything turns around the system of values built in this or that country, if we're to speak about a country level. And we all know that an image is not something that we try to tell everyone about ourselves. We're trying to show our best sides and good qualities. No, it's what other people are saying about you behind your back. And
To our guests, first I would like to say some joke about how to recognize the Kazakh abroad. For example, in Europe, they say how to recognize Kazakh people. They say if you see Chinese walking down the street speaking Russian, so definitely this is Kazakh. So this practical question to our guests, in your point of view, what does Kazakhstan have image? What kind of image do we have in your point of view? Thank you very much.
Who would like to take that?
Okay, I'm going to be straight about this. Right now, Kazakhstan does not have an image. In its neighborhood, of course it does. Every country has an image in its neighborhood. But right now, Kazakhstan is not a well-known country around the world.
That's a good thing.
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a fact. Last time I checked, there were 205 countries on the planet, okay? Most people do not have time to think about other countries that have no relevance to their daily lives. I mean, to all the people who are upset about the fact that nobody in the world seems to know anything about Kazakhstan, I would ask them a question. When was the last time you thought about Cambodia, or Uruguay, or Botswana, or Djibouti, or Iceland? I mean, we do not think about other countries very much. So it's absolutely normal. I didn't have any particular impression of Kazakhstan before I came here. I've been here now 4 or 5 times. I love it. Every time I go home, I say, "They're so nice there." And my wife said to me after about the 133rd country that I returned from, and she says, "What was it like?" And I say, "The people were so nice." And she said, "You've now said that 133 times. I've never been to a country where the people weren't nice." So I've come to the conclusion that people are nice.
Well, it means we have a good start. But yeah, I was waiting for somebody to finally notice the dress that I specifically wear to, showcase the public diplomacy side of Kazakhstan's diplomacy. So thank you, Kanat.
Olga?
Just very quickly saying that we all love our countries, we all cherish our cultural identity, our history, but it's very important how other people see us. So I really agree on your point. And it's true that your country is not as visible to the world right now. So there's nothing to say about how you would correct, let's say, an image. It's more on how you build on this image. This is my first time in Kazakhstan, and I would say that I really, really love it, and I feel that you're very, very friendly and hospitable, and this is really something that makes you feel very much at home. And I would not agree with Simon that all people in the world are very friendly and hospitable. I think that you would, probably they're just friendly to you because they need you to say good things about their country. So I think it's important, and we see this especially for tourism. I go back to tourism because that's where my expertise is. People will always remember how they feel in a country. And I think that the warmth of the people, the hospitality is even more important than having, luxurious 5-star hotels with, amazing infrastructure, and yet not having, the warmth of the service of the people. And it's very important to be authentic. Don't try to be something else than what you are. Try to be yourself. Thank you.
And this is why Thailand has been so successful, of course. One last question. We're running out of time, I'm afraid.
I'm Harry Nanda from Canada. My question is for Simon. What do you think of Donald Trump's campaign? Is it harming the Republican Party or the image of United States in the international forums?
Harry, I'm really sorry, I didn't hear your question. Can you say it again just a little bit louder?
I said, what do you think of Donald Trump's campaign? Is it harming the image of Republican Party or the United States overall?
Oh God, I mean, every morning when I wake up, I wish that Donald Trump had never been born, but I suppose he serves to remind us. The worrying thing about Donald Trump is not Donald Trump, it's the number of people who listen to him. And this narrow-minded, retrograde, nationalist, fundamentalist kind of politics will always find an audience, always. And I suppose the lesson we learn from Donald Trump is that there's a little part in all of us which is prepared to interpret the difficulties in their own lives and blame them on the other, on the foreigners. And it's very dangerous. It's a part of human nature that we should all be very vigilant of, and we should combat vigorously. The trouble with people like Donald Trump, politicians like him, and to a degree it's the same with Beppe Grillo in Italy, it's the same with the nasty right-wing parties that have been troubling Greece and Austria and Germany. It's the same with all of these narrow-minded nationalist politicians, that they appeal to people's anger. And it's a very simple trick. There are always going to be angry people in any country. And if you can reflect their anger back on them, then they will applaud and they will vote for you. The trouble is, those people seldom know how to run a country. So when they get elected, that's usually the end of the story because they don't know how to run a country, they don't know how to govern. And I think that in the unlikely event that Donald Trump does become the next president of the United States, he's going to have to change his tune on just about every single thing he's ever said in public within about a week. Otherwise, he will not be able to perform his job. And it's going to be the most humiliating turnaround in history. So maybe in a way, it's the best thing that could possibly happen.
Thank you. So may we have some very short concluding remarks from our panel, starting with
Just
Ramon.
very quickly, I would like to respond to this question, just to remind everyone that it's true that countries are, in a way, associated with their leadership. So, in effect, yes, I would think that should Donald Trump be elected as president of the USA, that would mean that the image of the US would, in a way, be associated with his character. And this is why I would like to praise the leadership in Kazakhstan for their efforts in nuclear disarmament and their efforts in undertaking initiatives that could, in effect, be proven to be good for the rest of the world.
Concluding remarks now, starting with Minister Ramon.
Thank you so much. Well, if we step back a little bit from the discussion we just had, I think that there are perhaps three key components to successful branding effort, perhaps national branding effort. Even though Simon doesn't like the term, and I don't either. It's better, well, just presenting the country as is. I think there are three fundamental factors, and one would be the actual fundamentals of the social and economic development of the country, which are there and which need to be further developed and promoted, such as the economic development, improving the well-being of the country, and contributing to resolution of global problems. That's number one. Second, I think what is important to have is what perhaps can be called a top-down approach. There has to be a concerted effort on behalf of the government, on behalf of the country's leadership. And third, perhaps even more important, is the buy-in from the people of Kazakhstan. And I see this really happening over the past few years in Kazakhstan. As I was already saying, the society has become a powerful proponent of building a very strong national image, a very good national image of a country that cares for others. So the people of Kazakhstan have now matured to that stage, I believe, and this is the biggest driving force for the change for the better.
Thank you. And could the other panelists keep your statements very brief? Thank you.
Well, I think I've made all my points. Just as a conclusion, I would say that I believe that there needs to be a strategy for whatever you need to do in your country, and that it has to be coherent and consistent. And again, I want to go back to my point that it's most important to project values to the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And Simon?
The best thing about being human is that we're all different. The best thing about globalization is that it's enabled all of us to meet each other all the time, every day. So the world is now not just a bundle of problems, the world is now a bundle of opportunities. And if we celebrate and enjoy that incredible richness, that diversity of language and culture and race and nationality, we will perform better, we will achieve more, we will have more fun, and we will not be cursed by our grandchildren.
And Mr. Shomanov.
Благодарю.
Thank you. Today we've had a very pleasant and a very interesting and useful in all terms discussion, and using this chance, let me invite all of you, the distinguished participants of this meeting today, to our exhibition Expo 2017 in Astana. Please become our guests and get the spirit of the exhibition.
Maxim.
Thank you. I'll just quickly wrap up by saying that the strategies and tools for image branding vary greatly from country to country, and even within oil-producing countries, what may work for Kazakhstan or for the United Arab Emirates will not work for Russia, for instance, or what works for the United States may not necessarily work for China. But I'll just say that they're probably in the image building, as in public diplomacy in general, there is no elevator to success. You got to take the stairs.
Thank you to all our panelists, Minister Vasilenko, Olga Kefalogianni, Simon Anholt, Mr. Yerbo Shovanov, and Maxim Suchkov. Thank you very much. I got a lot out of it. And it's important to realize, even in this image-conscious era, that it is better to be good than to be just seen as good. Thank you very much.